America and being taken by people in New Zealand. It's a perfect example of what the new technologies allow to do in the world. And in fact, I think, and with some of the recent Baha'i statements have basically said so, that at the point at which enough concerned leaders recognize that the unity of the human race is the only way to go, that these are global problems, we need to address them as a unified world society. We can't go on with this national sovereignty, which is behind the United Nations, behind behavior governments, and behind the failures in the climate change negotiations. The day that they realize, then they can use the tools of the educational processes to educate the whole world population to these new, more united values. And then we can very quickly get a process of consultation among all the peoples of the world. Where do we want to go with our society? So it's not just something top-down, but it's everybody saying, what is really important? How do we emphasize that? What are our shared goals going to be? How do we move forward to do so? And we now have the technologies to do things at a global scale. It's become possible.
Grassroots.
Yes. And not just grassroots, but grassroots linked with various levels of cohesion and coordination.
But from the bottom up.
So if you're driven from the bottom up, but recognizing that some challenges are global, like climate change, and must be dealt with globally. There's no way you can say the climate stops here. You can mess your climate. We're going to keep our climate. And there are a number of other problems like that that are truly global. But then there are many things that shouldn't even be done at the national level. The environments are different. The tip of the South Island is not the same thing as the Bay of Plenty or something. So different environments, different requirements. We need to be able to adapt to all those different conditions. And so we need to have much more empowerment of people, both empowerment in terms of the scientific knowledge and in terms of the values, to be able to consult and make their own decisions. And we're not saying that there's one pattern to be applied everywhere. We need millions of patterns being generated as each community explores the appropriate solutions to their own particular set of cultural needs and environmental requirements and social needs and economic needs. And bringing all of that together in a coherence for them, but paying attention to how that links to the higher levels and being responsible also to those other levels.
I was going to ask you about cities, and in particular skyscrapers and things like that.
There are a number of things in the Baha'i writings or things that were said by Baha'i leaders. I think when Abdul Baha, the son of Anwar, went to New York, he said it was unhealthy to live in such tall buildings, which seemed to supply that level of density. Maybe even if it might seem logical in one sense, may not be psychologically healthy to be stacked up that way, or so cut off from nature that way. If it's only the artificial garden on one side of your building, is that enough? And we know that contact with nature is fundamentally important. They've actually done research that shows that sick people in hospitals, if they have a window that looks at a tree, they get better faster than they have a window that looks at another building. And then they even did the experiment where they put a video screen the size of the window with a picture of the tree on exactly the same. It didn't have the same effect as seeing the real tree out the window. So a virtual tree wasn't good enough. It had to be a real tree. So there's something about real direct contact with nature that has a spiritual and psychological significance. It's not just some convenient add-on that you can do on your vacation. But also, if you look at, say, some of the Baha'i institutions, in the Baha'i faith we have, there's a local administrative body which is supposed to consult on the needs of the community and meet with the community every 19 days for general consultation and so on. And you say, can 10 million people meet together to consult with the governing body of their structure? What human scale is implied by such structures? Or even the concept of a house of worship, which is a place where everybody in the community comes in the morning to pray before going over after their day-to-day work and so on. It all seems to scale to communities of maybe a few thousand or something like that, but not mega cities. And nowhere have I seen anything in the Baha'i writings that talk about mega cities except the one around the Bay of Haifa, between Akka and Haifa. That would be the nerve center of world civilization. But and even prayers that were given to cities in America, you know, Washington will become a green garden of the earth, you know. Is this simply metaphorical, or does it also seem to imply something else, change in the urban? So my assumption from those various different points is that we're looking at a much more dispersed kind of community, at a much more human scale, where people can in fact know each other and work together, and function as a dynamic community. And the technology is making that possible. We no longer need to gather in large cities to have an opera house, for instance, to profit from certain, or to have a research library. Suddenly anybody can log on the web and consult. So the technologies are allowing us to share in other ways than by physical proximity. And this also might greatly reduce the need for transport, in the sense that, if most things can be at a human scale, within reach, so to speak, and everybody takes part in the gardening in the morning instead of paying to go to the gym, and in the afternoon they maybe go to the factory, they play in the orchestra, and so on and so forth, or the young people do this, the people that go into research, and so on and so forth. We may find that the concept of careers and so on, instead of just developing one characteristic of a person and exploiting them for 40 years and then throwing them on the jump peak as retired, we may say, how do we develop all of the talents of every human being in our community? And that would be the real measure of development, not GDP.
So you could have 3 sort of little specialties, so you have variety in your life.
As many as you have talents and as time, and finding the appropriate balance. And the balance when you're young, healthy, energetic, and strong may be different from when you're hobbling with a couple of crutches and so on in your old age. But the things you could when I was in high school, secondary school, I went to a brand new private school by a man who'd been director of a school system and decided he wanted to develop his own ideas of education. They couldn't afford regular teachers, so almost all of them was retired people. So the math was entirely retired captains and admirals from the Navy. And when they could see that people were getting a bit bored with the lesson, he said, next problem, I'm taking my destroyer out of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese bombs are dropping, how do I navigate, calculate, Suddenly they bring the subject alive because they had a whole life experience to share. So one could easily see how we would say, how do we use each person's capacities at each stage in their life to the maximum, fashion to enrich, our community in all its different ways. And that would be one of the functions of you might say, of governance in the community, is to make use of every human being, and that would be the measure of the community's success to do so.
I think you see a light at the end of the tunnel, because there's a lot of people looking at the closed stuff at Western Point, and I think it's very interesting. And it's refreshing to you. It's refreshing.
I try not to be too depressing in my talk, even though a lot of the things I say are pretty negative.
I'm amazed how you managed to get it across in such a positive way. And you've told us some
I think it's a little
solid truths that are very quite disturbing.
It's a little bit like your adolescent, isn't it?
Well, that's what's
you
wrong.
watch them, and you just hope they're going to stay alive, because you know they're going to reach adulthood, and they'll view things differently. It's a similar kind of...
And that's what society also is to reach adulthood. We're going through our painful adolescence at the moment.
Yeah.
The moment mankind recognizes, as you said, that we are all spiritual in nature, and that we are actually holistic as a world, then actually the problems will disappear very quickly, because we'll all work together to solve those problems, which will be very exciting.
But ultimately the key to that must be that all of this is viewed within a framework, i.e. the Baha'i framework, so that there's a measure against which all these solutions can be measured. So you can measure their effectiveness, whereas take that framework out and take that standard out, and it actually doesn't matter what you do, there's nothing there to give it all a coherence.
You need a whole package.
You need the whole package.
It's not the bits and pieces. As a system scientist, my specialty is complex systems. Any one component makes the whole system, makes the whole system collapse. You need to integrate it all. That's why in sustainability they always say you have to integrate the economic, the social, the environmental. All those components have to be there in balance for the whole system to work and function effectively. And if any one part is out of balance, then it damages and affects all the others. But at the same time, you can tell a teenager, you are going to grow up, and you are going to discover these things. They may not believe it at the time,
Yeah,
they do the other things, but that is the process. Another thing that made me optimistic is, in fact, as a biologist, when I've seen complex natural systems like a coral reef that might say have learned the lessons, in which you have not just the eye for an eye, tooth for tooth kind of savage competition, that the Darwinian view of evolution, but you have symbiosis, collaboration, everything's working together in highly integrated systems, and each contributing something to the other, and being highly productive and very dense in resource-poor environments, because they're efficient at capturing and using solar energy to power the system. There's very little waste. They recycle all of the rare materials and so on. There already are models in nature of how human society should be. If nature can do it, you'd think we'd be intelligent enough to figure out a way of doing it.
I think
there was another of the speakers at Ethics Forum last summer in Geneva that he described himself as a forensic accountant. And he had trained most of the staff in the U.S. Federal Reserve System. He'd been an expert witness in a lot of the trials on the subprime problem and so on. He therefore had access to tens of thousands of internal communications in the big banks and institutions. He said, there's blatant fraud everywhere. There's collusion between the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Treasury, the banks, the European Central Bank. That I think it was J.P. Morgan had been hiding the Italian debt, and Citibank had been hiding the Greek debt, and all of these things. Of course, it's confidential, but it's clear that the ethics are lacking in that system. This is the infant behavior. When there's no spirituality, when there's no recognition of a higher purpose, we're trapped at the childlike level of functioning. And that's the way that's the way society works.
So part of the problem is the concept of ownership of land too, isn't it? Because I mean, if I was to walk out into a rural area and start building a vegetable garden there, I'd get the short shift, be in jail before you know. So the people who own these rural properties have a responsibility with other people on the planet to understand they have other people have rights as well as they have responsibilities. I don't know how you get that across, but it probably can come in some ways with that.
Well, you can draw on your wonderful Maori tradition, because as I understand in the Polynesian traditions, I didn't work much in New Zealand, but I worked in the Pacific Islands, there wasn't a concept of ownership of land in that sense. The land belonged to the family, and you had different rights to different things. You might have a right to collect fruit off of certain trees, or a right to garden a little bit here and there, and this was a transferable right. It was a right that was adapted and adjusted to the needs of the people. It was much more flexible, much more adaptable. And of course also done in a concept of sharing, that if you need something, you can go and take it, and if somebody they can take something as well. And there's a reciprocity in that sharing as well. So that the concept of private property and my land, and you can't do anything on it, is just totally foreign to the point of view. So that we need to rethink.
That's a new discussion that
we
needs to be
need
had,
to
isn't it?
rethink much more fundamentally.
But in Rarotonga, they're having problems with that because they want to rent the land to other people, and they can't get the community agreement, to be able to develop the land.
But this is where you have the incompatibility of different systems. I mean, you see it in Samoa as well, where somebody will come in, they want to set up a little roadside shop to sell things, but of course all the family would come and they would ask for something, and because it was family, you had to give it to them because you had to share, and suddenly there was no stock left. And so, yes, there are often incompatibilities. The systems don't always fit together, and you also have people who might have gone overseas to study, and they come back and they want to apply their new knowledge